Hello and welcome to the Texas Tribune Tribcast for August 5th, 2025. I'm Matthew Watkins, editor-in-chief of the Tribune, back from my sojourn on the Gulf Coast. I am joined, as usual, by law and politics reporter Eleanor Klebanoff. Hello, Eleanor.
Thanks for having me.
Did I miss anything while I was gone?
Didn't miss any news.
All
Nothing
right.
has happened. We had nothing to talk about this week.
Yeah, we really had to scramble to come up with the topic.
Exactly.
Yes. Of course, since you last heard Eleanor's voice, Texas Republicans released their proposed map for redrawn congressional districts in the state, aiming to give their party 5 new seats. The seats were scheduled for a floor vote in the House on Monday. But before that could happen, more than 50 Democrats fled the state, denying the House the quorum necessary to pass the bill. This, of course, has caused outrage from Republicans, excitement among Democrats. House Speaker Dustin Burrows signed arrest warrants for the members. Governor Greg Abbott has threatened to expel them from office and ordered investigations as to whether they're committing felony bribery. But for now, at least, the work of the House has ground to a halt with 14 days left in the special session. We are joined today by one of those Democrats who left the state, State Representative Gina Hinojosa, a Democrat from Austin. Welcome, Representative. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So where are you right now? Tell us your location.
I don't know if I can do that. I'm at this undisclosed location outside the state.
Very mysterious.
I'm right outside of Chicago, in a suburb of Chicago.
Okay, excellent. I just, wanted to make clear that you weren't in the newsroom with us. We don't want any DPS showing up at our doors.
Yes.
Very good. But thank you for joining us. It has been a very eventful few days, week, or even more, really, in Texas politics. I want to just start by sort of asking you, just big picture, tell us why you made the decision to leave the state.
It was an obvious decision for me. I heard such concern, such alarm from constituents about these Trump maps. I will say I had originally heard about this plan on Sine Die. I had heard rumors of it. I didn't know about the 5 seats, and I didn't know that they would try to attain the 5 Republican seats by breaking up Latino districts and Black districts. Right. But when I first heard the plan, I thought, well, this is troubling, and started to worry, started to talk to people, and I tried to prepare people for this potentially coming. But once we saw the maps and saw what they did to Austin, what they did just to Texans, it was clear to me and to enough of us that the best plan of attack would be to leave the state to break quorum and deny them the numbers they need to pass the bill.
Let's talk briefly about those maps, right? Because last time this podcast recorded, they had not been released,
right.
I understand. Tell us just from your perspective, Representative, what was it about that map that, affirmed for y'all that, yes, we need to leave in order to stop this. This is, really the nuclear option, right? That's the biggest step y'all could take to block legislation.
Right. Breaking quorum is an extraordinary act that we use just for the most egregious bills. And let me say, there are plenty of egregious bills in our eyes that come through the Texas legislature. We haven't done this since 2021. When we did it in 21, it was a big deal. It hadn't been done for years before that. So this is not something that we take lightly. It, first of all, is hard for individual members to leave their lives, leave their families, leave their jobs to do this. So the maps, though, let me give you an example of Austin, where I represent. We have 2 congressional districts in Austin, and the Trump maps eliminate the Latino Opportunity District in Austin that currently has a Latino representing that district, and then takes a big chunk of downtown Austin, which is in the Texas House district that I represent and connects it to a Republican East Texas district that goes all the way to Polk County, over 200 miles away, gutting really the political voice in Congress of downtown Austin, and really effectively gutting the voice of the Latino community and their ability to select the representative of their choosing in Congress. That's just Austin, right? Houston, if you look at Houston, that is where you have the largest number of Latinos of any other place in Texas, is in Houston. They have eliminated the Latino opportunity seat there as well. And so if these Trump maps pass, there will no longer be a Latino seat in Houston, which is outrageous. So those are just two examples. I heard from Julie Johnson last night about how her congressional district is cut into 7 districts. The list goes on and on. So once we saw the specific damage done to our constituents and their political power, it was easy for me and for the rest of us to choose this course of action.
I mean, I think, like, your Republican colleagues would say, we drew these maps in 2021, pretty cautiously to protect our incumbents. We had this blowout election in 2024 for Republicans. We're going to redraw these maps. It is purely partisan, is sort of the message that we're hearing, which, of course, the courts have said, like, as long as it's partisan, that's fine. We still have the protections of the Voting Rights Act. You can't sort of discriminate against voters of color. But certainly what we've been hearing from Republicans, just particularly in the last couple of days, is, we have a right to draw partisan maps if we want to. I'm seeing a lot of people now are calling it the big, beautiful map. We're getting a lot of branding around this as, like, this is just about Republican politics. How does that, do you think that sort of rings true to you, this idea that this is just politics, it's not about disadvantaging Black and brown voters?
So I actually think this is kind of hilarious, the way Republicans are insisting, no, this isn't about race. This is just a pure partisan power grab, right? And they are so insistent that that is their motivation because they said the quiet part out loud by issuing that Department of Justice letter that specifically said these majority minority districts should be targeted for elimination because of race, right? The governor's proclamation then cites as the sole reason for a mid-decade redistricting session that letter. And now legislature saying, oh no, did we say this was about race? No, actually, this is a pure partisan power grab. So they're trying to cover up their mistake, but it is on the record. It could not be more clear that this is about race. And let me say this, though. It is both things, because the intended purpose is to achieve 5 additional Republican members of Congress. Their Department of Justice letter, the governor's proclamation, made clear the way they intend to do that is by eliminating majority minority districts.
Okay, so I want to ask you about, you mentioned that y'all did this previously in 2021. There have been some things that have changed.
The quorum break. Or the redistricting. Well,
yes.
You did both, but you...
Yes, I'm specifically talking about the quorum break. That at the time was to block a bill imposing new voting restrictions in the state and everything like that. Since then, things have changed around the rules around quorum breaks. The House, passed rules that would include a $500 fine. There is now the as I mentioned in the introduction, Governor Abbott, talking about possibly pursuing criminal charges against members. We can get a little bit more into that. How prepared are you and your colleagues to withstand that financial and legal pressure into the long term? How long can you make this last given that situation?
So my primary concern is defending my constituents. right? They have a fundamental right to representation, to hold our politicians accountable for the hurt and abuse that they are suffering. And the list of that hurt and abuse goes on and on. High prices at the grocery store because of these pay-to-play tariffs. Constituents are losing health care. Our neighborhood schools are losing money, are going without. That list goes on and on. So that's my primary concern. Let me start with that. I think those $500 fines are unconstitutional under the Texas Constitution. Texas is one of only 4 states that authorizes the breaking of quorum. That is a rule. That is, I'm sorry, a procedure under the rules that we can take to represent our constituents. It is the way that we protect their interests, and we should not be punished for using what is a procedural tool in the toolbox. So I think it's unconstitutional, but I'll say this. I'll say that, again, the primary importance here is protecting our constituents. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to do that. If you think about all the ways that Texans, Americans have sacrificed for our freedoms, this is, in comparison, not a lot to ask of elected leaders whose job it is to represent and protect the interests of our constituents.
Do you anticipate legal action against those fines to sort of challenge that unconstitutionality?
Well, it's too early to say, right? They can't impose those fines until there's a quorum and there's a vote to do so. So it's a little premature to say, but I do think it is legally questionable.
So we are 96 days from the November 8th filing period. Hypothetically, if lawmakers were to stay for that entire time, that would add up to a $48,000 fine, assuming that Abbott were to just continue calling special sessions, which I think is probably a pretty safe assumption. So we're talking about $48,000 worth of fines. It is no secret that state lawmakers are not highly paid, $7,200 per year. Of course, you all have other jobs, but presumably many of those jobs might be complicated in how they might be able to be done when you're not in the state. How there has been reporting, including from the Tribune, about fundraising in order to help kind of bear that financial costs. How are y'all going to pay for this? How are you raising money? Are you planning to use donor funds to help bear the cost of this expense?
So I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. We are on day 2 of our quorum break, and we're taking it day by day, right? I just have to be honest. I am not concerned about those fines right now. That is not, that does not scare me. It is not a motivator for me. What is a motivator for me is to be able to protect my constituents. And let me say this. Let me take a moment to put in perspective and context what is happening today. So when 1,000 people showed up to oppose these maps in Arlington to testify, right? Hundreds and hundreds of people showed up to testify in Austin over maps that I think have been released 24 hours, 48 hours, maybe. This has happened so fast, and you see that Texans are ready for a fight and ready to stand up to Donald Trump. In some ways, this fight is a gift to us. It is a rallying call to Texans, to Americans, that we do not have to bend a knee to Donald Trump, and we can take the fight directly to him. And the support, the overwhelming gratitude that we are hearing from constituents and from Americans all over this country reinforces that people are ready for this fight. And so I'm not motivated by the fear of fines. I am extremely motivated and propelled by just the determination of my constituents and Texans and Americans to do what it takes to stand up to Trump on this most fundamental of our values. It is about who we are. It is our identity as Americans. Representation is why we exist as a country. And I'm proud to be part of that.
Do you feel like there's cohesiveness among the caucus on that, of like we're in this for the long haul, and that mounting dollar amount doesn't scare us?
Let me say that getting independently elected leaders on the same page about anything is a struggle, right? Everybody is strong-willed and has their own good ideas, but we all understand the stakes, and so we work through these things every day because we have the shared goal, and that's to protect our constituents and stand up for what's right. So it is a day-by-day conversation. It is a day-by-day fight, and today we are united in that fight.
Terry Canales, one of your colleagues who did not make the trip, told our reporter Renzo Downey yesterday that he thought the outcome of this is inevitable. And I think what he meant by that was inevitable that eventually these maps would get passed. Am I hearing from you that you disagree with that assessment right now?
I just disagree in that defeatist attitude. It is inevitable if we do nothing and we don't fight. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's inevitable. But that's not what we're doing. That is the only thing that is inevitable, that it will happen if we don't fight. So what we learned in the 21 quorum break was when we broke quorum for the day to kill the regular session, and then we broke quorum for the 30 days of the special session. We went to DC, we lobbied on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That didn't pass, but something else happened. And that's that Republicans were so shamed by the national attention they were getting on their bill that they could not defend, that they gutted the most offensive parts of the bill, the parts of the bill that inspired our quorum break. We could not have anticipated that outcome when we broke quorum on that one day to kill the end of the regular session or for the special session. All we knew was that we had to fight to win that day, and we take it day by day. That is the lesson from the 21 quorum break that we bring to this quorum break, where the stakes are even higher.
And I do think a difference between 2021 and now is the level of national awareness of what's going on, right? This has become sort of like a national arms race in a way. We've got blue states saying they want to redistrict now. Certainly, does that feel different for you all, that you're obviously getting a lot of support from national Democrats?
Yeah, so in 21, it was just like this rogue thing that happened on our own. We had no support at the time. We just did it. And so this feels very different, right? We have the DNC leader here today, Ken Martin, who's supporting us and grateful for what we are doing. We had Jeffries come, Leader Jeffries come and speak to us last week in Austin. So yes, it's very different in that we have institutional support from national Democrats, and in some ways it's easier. What's harder is we have now a Republican president, right? When we broke quorum in 21, it was Biden who was president. We were able to go to DC, but having Donald Trump as president is different, and it means that we have to play this a little differently.
I think one of the dynamics here, you mentioned other states, California, saying if New York possibly, if Texas does this, we're going to do our own type of redistricting. California, the partisan breakdown right now already 43 Democrats, 9 Republicans. It is all disproportionately Democratic in the same way that Texas is disproportionately Republican. I think there are a lot of people who view this as not an encouraging sign in either direction when these types of things happen. But there's also, I'm not naive in thinking that one party is not going to unilaterally disarm in this fight, right? And I bring that up to sort of ask you the question is there any hope of either side standing down here, or the two sides coming to an agreement of let's just let these maps stick the way they are? In the political climate that we find ourselves in, is that even
You're
possible,
saying
do you
a
think?
Cold War style
let's just,
detente.
this is not good for anyone. Let's not redraw any maps here.
Oh, that's a nice idea.
Naive, maybe.
Yeah.
I heard last night from one of our members of Congress that there were two Republican members of Congress who had now filed bills to eliminate mid-decade redistricting. So they're starting to feel the heat in other parts of the country because, no, this is not ideal for anyone. And in fact, if Democrats were the majority in Texas, we would have nonpartisan, independent citizen redistricting commissions. That is legislation Democrats have filed. I believe I've signed on to those pieces of legislation. That would be ideal. That's what we would have if Democrats were in power. We don't exist in that world today. That world does not exist today. And so what you're seeing is governors in other states, Democratic governors in other states, trying to figure out, given this Trump power play in Texas, how can I protect my own constituents from the outcome of trying to predetermine the 2026 midterms, right? So it's understandable, right? Is it ideal? No. What would be ideal is if everybody played by the same rules and we had these nonpartisan citizen redistricting commissions. We just don't live in that world today. But again, this is a day-by-day deal. You're starting to see some movement on the Republican side because they don't like this arms war, and we'll see where it ends.
All right, I'm going to pause right here to read a note from our sponsor, which is the Texas Tribune this week, our membership program. Texas needs trusted journalism. Help sustain fact-based reporting around the state about state issues by donating to the Tribune newsroom. Become a member today at texastribune.org/donate. All right, Representative, I want to ask you about the calculus about the other issues on the table during the special session, particularly flood relief, right? It is true that while Democrats are not in Texas, that they cannot pass a map of new congressional districts. It also means they cannot pass legislation in response to these terrible floods that happen, including in Travis County, but also in the Hill Country as well. Did that factor into y'all's decision? How do you feel about that work being grinded to a halt at the same time this other work is as well?
That work hardly even kicked off when we were still in Texas. We had only had 2 hearings that were scheduled by the Republican majority on flood relief. We had 8 hearings on Trump's maps. So it became clear to us that the Republican majority was not interested in prioritizing flood relief. Even if you look at the call on the House to arrest us, it's to pass the maps. It's not to pass flood relief. The biggest problem we have with flooding and extreme weather is more who's elected and who's in charge than what the laws are. We know that it was revealed that the all Abbott elected river authority had $3.4 million in their reserves that they did not use for an emergency warning system for floods. That would have cost $1 million. They didn't use that money. We know the governor could, in fact, on his own, use his emergency powers to transfer money for flood relief victims, just like he transferred $250 million from one agency to build parts of a border wall in 2021. That was not an appropriate use of that power. Today, absolutely, when you have an act of God emergency, weather emergency, this would be an appropriate time to use his power. But what he is doing here is the same thing that he did with the school voucher fight. He is holding hostage something that everyone wants, which is flood relief, so as to pass his political maps. He's playing political games. Remember, he did the same thing by withholding funding for schools because he didn't get his voucher scam passed. We will not play those games. He needs to be responsible. He needs to own his leadership position and his authority to grant that relief now and stop playing these political games.
Speaking of the governor, we have certainly heard some big talk from Governor Abbott in the last couple of days about, saying he would like to begin the proceedings to declare your seats vacant, talking about, calling special elections to fill those seats. Certainly, as we mentioned, the felony bribery investigated by he's called on the Texas Rangers to investigate you all for felony bribery. Just talking first about the vacating the seats. I mean, how credible of a threat is that to you? How worried are you all?
I'm not the least bit worried about that. I will say it's shameful. It is disrespectful to Texans, to the voters, to threaten to remove from office their duly elected representatives. They chose us, elected us to represent them in the House. They support us with overwhelming support in this endeavor. And so it is really, though, in keeping with what he is doing with these redistricting maps, right? Trying to silence voters, trying to subvert their will.
So you don't think you're not worried about losing your seat?
He has no legal authority to do that. He's making threats that are outside the bounds of the law.
What about the bribery uh, uh, investigations?
All right, it's rich that we have the most corrupt governor in all of Texas history making allegations of bribery. This is the governor who accepted how many millions of dollars? I can't remember, like over $6 million from an out-of-state billionaire to pass the voucher scam. This is a governor who waives monthly since 2020 the competitive bidding laws to do no bid contracts, oftentimes to his donors. It is unprecedented grift. And so it is rich that the governor would be accusing us of bribery for raising funds during a period we're able to raise political funds.
So are you, just to make sure I understand though, are you and your colleagues raising funds to support the actions y'all have taken? Like, are you fundraising off this quorum break, and are you using donor funds to help you, sustain the considerable expenses of leaving your home, staying in a hotel, and all that stuff?
Well, what I'm raising funds for, I'll tell you what I'm doing personally. I'm raising funds to help with legal advice. I'm raising fund communications to help with paying my staff who are supporting this work. So the funds that I'm raising are to make me more effective at my job.
Okay. Where is the money coming from for the plane, for the hotel room, all those things?
So I'm not making those arrangements. That is, those are being made by the caucus, and I don't have that. I legitimately don't have that information. I will say that I flew my own staff here with campaign funds, and so that's how I paid for my staff.
Okay. Can you tell us just a little bit about just like what life is like for you right now? Like,
What's
how
the
are you
vibe?
passing your time? What are y'all hanging out
Yeah.
together? I mean, what's the scene up there?
It's very busy. A lot of what we're doing is just communicating. This has happened so fast. And it's at a time when families are vacationing, they're coming back to this drama. So we're having to constantly communicate so that people understand what is happening and why we took this action. So that's a large part of it. We're getting legal briefings as well. We are using this time to exchange ideas about efforts, policy efforts as well. So, but there just hasn't, I mean, we start first thing in the morning. I woke up for an interview yesterday I had a 4:50 in the morning interview yesterday, and we didn't get home till past 10 o'clock, right? So that's an idea of what our days have been like.
Do you worry? I mean, after the 2021 quorum break, now we've got these stricter rules around fines and things like that. Obviously, I was here yesterday in Austin. Your Republican colleagues are not thrilled with you all for leaving. Do you anticipate sort of a heightening of those sort of penalties, or eventually when we have a quorum legislation to make it harder to quorum break in the future?
I don't know what they will do, but let me say that their outrage is feigned. It's fake. They knew that doing mid-decade redistricting would provoke pretty extreme opposition from us. The last time it was done, 2003, there was also a quorum break. So for them to pretend like this is something they did not anticipate, did not expect, and is out of the ordinary for what they are doing is not real.
It's interesting to me how far we've gone in a year, right? I mean, there was a lot of sort of, in the lead up to this legislative session, this sort of like defending some of the like bipartisan nature of the House. We all work together, we work toward Texas. And now we're in a place where we're talking about, essentially throwing out almost all of the Democrats, from their elected seats. Do you see a long-term effect on the ability of the two parties to work together? Do you see a change in Democrats' support for the current House Speaker, who was elected with the support of many Democrats?
I did not vote for Speaker Burrows. He is a MAGA Republican, and I was not going to be a part of that. I understood from the beginning what his agenda was and still is. So, just speaking for myself, I'm not surprised by anything he has done. I fully anticipated it. And there are opportunities for Democrats and Republicans to work together, but that's when we have shared policy interests. You saw that vouchers was one of those bipartisan efforts where we came together to oppose it time and time again until Donald Trump weighed in and told Republican members of the legislature and of the House that he needed them to vote for the voucher. And they did as told because they do not feel free to stand up to him. So there is a little bit of space for some bipartisan initiatives on big overarching policy issues. It's really hard to come by these days, especially when they are so obedient to President Trump.
How are you just feeling about, our democracy, our state of government these days? I mean, what's your how are you feeling?
Well, that's why I'm doing this. I have a son who is 13 years old. We went to Philadelphia for a summer vacation this summer, and I needed him to understand what good ideals, honest, right ideals our country was founded on, because politics has become so nasty, so ugly, so bitter, and we're losing sight of who we are as Americans. I do this because I believe we have to fight to maintain what is good about our country and about public service. So, yeah, it's a scary time. We're at a crossroads in this country, and we have to fight with everything we've got to hold on to what matters in America. So that's the inspiration for why I do what I do.
All right, Representative. Well, we appreciate you taking some time to talk to us during what is clearly a busy time. Thank you for that. Thank you, Eleanor. And thank you to our producers, Rob and Chris. That's all for this week. We will talk to y'all next week.
Thank you.